Yes, Gooners, welcome to the Gooners Voice. Reece Jacobs here. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope you're enjoying the start to the Premier League season. And yeah, welcome to the voice of the Premier League champions. Today we're going to start this video. There's no other place to start it, right? We have to start it with Gabriel Martinelli. Big news coming out this weekend, last night, to be fair, from David Ornstein as well as Fabrizio Romano, that it looks like Gabby Martinelli is on his way out to Al-Hilal, and it looks like there's more clarity for Gabby and his team as to where he stands with Arsenal, and I think he accepts that he's no longer a key part of Mikel Arteta's champions. So where do we start? Right, we need to start with the fee, because the fee that Arsenal are looking at, I know there's still a lot of conversations around fee. Arsenal looking at around £60 million. Will they get the £60 million? I probably don't think that would be the fee. I think it's closer to about 55 million pounds. But in my opinion, anywhere between 50 and 60 million pounds would be a good fee for Martinelli, because not only is he a player that's no longer needed by Arteta, he's not anywhere near the squad. Okay, so he's not a starter. He's barely a bench player. We've seen that in the Community Shield. We've seen that in the first Premier League game of the season. So it's a really good fee. When you're comparing it to the fee of Savinho, and I urge Arsenal supporters and Arsenal fans, do not compare the two, because that is a fishy transfer going on there. I've read some reports that a portion of Savinho's fee is actually Marmoush's fee, and Man City have built that in so that they don't have to pay a significant sell-on percentage to Frankfurt. So Savinho's probably more or less in the region of what Martinelli is going for, 50-60 million pounds. And yeah, there's a reason City have got 115 charges against them. I'm not going to get into that. So don't compare the two. When you're looking at it on face value, Martinelli's not wanted by Arsenal. And when you have a player in that situation, there's a lot of low ball offers that would generally come in. So I think 50 to 60 million pounds is a great fee. The issue I have with it is, if you are replacing Martinelli, if you're letting him go for 60 million pounds, who are you bringing in? And the name that's being thrown around there, we've seen it this weekend. Yeah, he's had a torrid time at Atletico Madrid, to be fair, and he's brought it upon himself. I don't feel sorry for him. But that situation is untenable. There's just no way Julian Alvarez can continue at Atletico Madrid. We've seen stranger things in football. We've seen Carlos Tevez go on strike and come back and be absolutely fantastic for Man City. It could just take, 10 minutes to go, Julian Alvarez scores the winner against Real Madrid or Barcelona, and everything's forgiven. But it doesn't seem like he can go on with Atletico Madrid. The scary thing is that the player only wants Barcelona. We know that. He's been adamant throughout the transfer window that he only wants Barcelona. He's not looking at any other club. In fact, he's informed Arsenal a few times, and that's the issue I have. Arsenal, we're not the project club anymore. We've won a Premier League title. We're trying to get to the end game now, being around the Champions League every season. Can you win the Champions League? Can you consistently get to a semi-final, a final? We odds on for the Premier League this season. I know it's just the first game of the season. We should get ahead of ourselves, but you look at some of the closest challenges that people were hyping up. Man United, absolutely abysmal performance against Hull. We've yet to see Chelsea play. Liverpool struggled against Newcastle, albeit they got the draw in the end. City just scraped through against Bournemouth, and doesn't really look like Maresca understands what's going on there. So it looks like Arsenal could really walk away with the league without even adding to the team at this moment. So we're not in that project phase. Okay, we're not a stepping stone club. So I struggle to see how Arsenal can spend 150 million euros. That's what we're being quoted by Atletico Madrid for Julian Alvarez in a 4-year deal, 5-year deal, probably 4 years with an option, and being optimistic, only getting 2 years out of that deal, because then he'll start throwing his toys out the cot and start twerking for Barcelona again. So it just seems really strange that Arsenal would want to do this deal for that financial outlay, because you're just never going to get that sort of money back. Alvarez is not getting any younger. He's 26 years old. if he does stay for a season or 2 seasons, 27, 28, are you going to get 150 million pounds from Barcelona? Probably not. They're going to lowball you. So is Berta looking at it? Is Arteta looking at it thinking, for that year, for that 2 year, the success would, outweigh the financial loss? That remains to be seen. I'm just not in the Alvarez camp for one bit. I think it would be an absurd signing. Player that doesn't want to be at the club. What does that do to him? Is he there really? I prefer a loan. That's obviously out of the question, but I obviously would prefer a loan. Maybe a big loan fee of like 20 million pounds, and you bring him in for the season, then you have an option to buy him, see if that works. But spending 150 million only for him to try and get to Barcelona in the next year or two just doesn't seem viable for me. I have no qualms with the Martinelli sale. I love Martinelli. I've been a big fan of Martinelli since the Emery days when he got his chance, and things have just not worked out for him. The way Arsenal play, the controlled style of Mikel Arteta just doesn't suit Martinelli. He's more of a chaotic player. He would really suit that Jurgen Klopp style of football. That chaos, gang-ho type of football where there's a lot of space, and just hasn't worked out for Martinelli. He's had one fantastic season at Arsenal, our first title charge under Mikel Arteta, which we obviously didn't get over the line because of the style of football. He got 15 Premier League goals, but Arsenal have moved on. Arsenal have moved on from Trossard, they've moved on from Martinelli, and they've got a great player in Solis. Looks like the signing of the summer. A lot of people pointing at Yuri Tielemans, but yeah, that's gone to Hull. Solis looks like the signing of the summer for the fee and what he's offered Arsenal in pre-season in the first game of the Premier League. Is he enough? I think he's enough to win a Premier League title. I don't think he's enough in Europe. I don't think Arsenal have enough in the forward line for Europe. I don't think Kai Havertz... I say that and he scores such important goals. He scored such an important goal against PSG. So, yeah, maybe in the bigger games in Europe, you can depend on someone like Kai Havertz. He scored 2 Champions League final goals for Man City and Arsenal. For Chelsea and Arsenal. Gyökeres, big money we paid for him last season. Looks like he's going to stay this season. Kind of surprised he didn't come off the bench against Coventry. I'm not sure if we should read into that too much, but yeah. I worry what signing Alvarez would do to Solis, because then you're not going to play the left winger. You're going to have this fluid front two of Alvarez and Havertz, because we know Alvarez loves to play with the big man. We saw that when he played with Haaland. We saw that when he played, or like now he plays with Soloth at Atletico. Is Solis then just dropped to the bench after such a good preseason, after an amazing debut? Doesn't that hinder his development? So I worry on that one. I would rather much overpay an extra 10-20 million pounds on someone like Kenan Yildiz. We know it's an inflated market. We know Juventus has said he's not for sale, he's untouchable. But the reality is that the Serie A is not the Serie A of old. The Serie A does not have the financial power of a Premier League. So I think if you're going there with 100 million pounds, you could probably test Juventus. And if he is, like they report, really high up on Arsenal's radar for that left wing position, do you overpay now 10-20 million pounds, get him in this season, or do you accept with what you have and try again next season? Because we know he's got a long contract. I think that it's only ends at the end of this decade, to be fair, 2030. So I personally, I would much rather them overpay a couple of million and get Yildiz, who is suited for that left wing position. You've then got 2 brilliant players who offer 2 different options for Arteta and for Arsenal on that left wing, in Solis and Kenan Yildiz. He's got a great ceiling. He's a silky player. I have so many, a lot of Arsenal fans, I think probably about 80 to 90% of you guys probably feel the same way about Julian Alvarez. Just got too many doubts on it. Firstly, he doesn't want to come to Arsenal. He then settles for Arsenal. He probably has a good season. And then he goes to Barcelona. It just doesn't make sense for me. So it's really a transfer I would pull back from. Having said that, if you're not going to replace Martinelli, I do think you have to sell Martinelli, because it's the only window you're going to get a big financial outlay from any club that's going to come in for Martinelli. Because if he does stay at Arsenal, we see that he's just not in the plans. So then do you risk taking 20, 30 million next season? I don't think so. So I think you take the 60 million now. And if you don't get, Kenan Yildiz, I just cannot settle on Julian Alvarez. Do you then just say that Solis and Eze is enough? Personally, I think that's enough for the Premier League. I don't think that's enough for the Champions League. Having said that, Arteta has rebuilt the midfield to be a little bit more fluid and a little bit more attacking, and we've seen that in pre-season, we've seen that in Community Shield, that Bruno Guimaraes will add something different to Arsenal. I think a lot of us thought he's going to come in here and be that combative player, which he is, but he's going to add a lot of freedom to players like Declan Rice, Martin Odegaard, and we saw how good Odegaard, Ben White and Saka were back, on Friday. Just felt like the old trio. So maybe you got enough, and maybe you just need to sell Martinelli. I think it's a massive week for Andrea Berta because he's got the recruitment right this season. Yes, he's overpaid on a couple of players in terms of their age, like Guimaraes, like Ezra Konsa, but he's plugged the holes that we needed to plug. He's gotten a player that really transforms the midfield for Arsenal. So what happens with Gabriel Jesus? Massive wages that you need to get off the books at Arsenal, because we are really cutting it tight with UEFA at this point. So what happens to Jesus? Can you get 10 million pounds on Jesus and get his wages off the books? What happens with Fabio Vieira? What's happening with Ethan Nwaneri? A lot of players that Berta needs to get off the books. Reece Nelson, big week for Andrea Berta, big week for Arsenal in general. Are they replacing Martinelli? Are they bringing in Julian Alvarez? It remains to be seen, but exciting week indeed, and just really want to get past the transfer window now and just focus on football. But I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. Love to hear your thoughts, goodness. Are you Team Yildiz like I am? Are you Team Alvarez? I don't think there are many. And I don't want anyone confusing my doubts on Alvarez as a player. He's an amazing player. He's one of the best number 9s in the world. He's got that elite level ability and that buzzword ball striking. But yeah, he's scored some fantastic goals, not only at Man City, Atletico Madrid. We've seen a couple of dead ball situations where Alvarez has just put it into the top corner. I just don't feel he's the one for Arsenal. I would much rather just save that 150, 140 million and look at some traditional left winger in the form of Yildiz. Maybe not Barcola for the money PSG are quoting Liverpool, but yeah, I'd much prefer a left winger where you've got two solid options as opposed to Eze and Solis, and then you've got Alvarez and Gyökeres and Havertz. It just seems imbalanced for me. But yeah, I think that's where we ended today. Love to get you guys' thoughts. Anything in the comments, chat about in the next video. But for today, that's us on the Goodness Voice. Peace.